Okay, so I shared with you about how I met the boss, and met God, and I wanted to carry on and just share what happened the next day. So I woke up the following day knowing God was real, but still full of questions. If God was real, what about all the things that had driven me away from my Catholic faith as a child? The question of hell, if God is so loving, why does he send people to hell? And suffering, why is there so much suffering if you're such a loving God? And I started asking God these questions. And where were you when all these things happened to me? I was suicidal at one point. Where were you? And well, so one of these big questions I was asking in my head, not out loud. And one of the Christians came up to me with a Bible and said, Dominic, I think you should read this. I said, I'm sorry, I don't really read the Bible. It's not my thing, you know. And he said, no, not the whole Bible, just this line. And I took the Bible and looked, and it was an answer to the question I'd been asking all that morning. And in my head, I said, that's a coincidence. I said, well, what makes you think I should look at this? He said, I just felt God wanted you to look at it. I said, oh, thank you. And I thought, well, okay, but I've got some more questions. And I had another question. I started asking, well, what about so-and-so? We stopped at lunchtime in a Methodist chapel, and written above the door was carved wooden scripture that answered my question. And I thought, what a coincidence. This has been there hundreds of years. We happened to turn up here this morning and it answers my question. What's the chances of that? This went on all day and for the rest of the week. Every question I asked in my head, not out loud, the answer by coincidence came back, written on a piece of paper as we stepped into a church, the theme for the study, whatever it was, it just kept coming. And eventually this was so striking that we finished the pilgrimage. We were in this little place, Walsingham, and sitting in a pub celebrating the end of the pilgrimage and the middle of the services and everything else going on around us. And one of the girls in the group shared something about God. And because I'd had a few pints of beer at this point, it was an answer to what I'd been asking God all day long. And so I said out loud, that's a coincidence. And halfway through the word coincidence, I started to laugh. And they looked at me very strangely and said, Dom, yeah, she was making a serious point there. What are you laughing at? And what's a coincidence? I said, coincidence. I said, I think the source of all things, I still didn't like the word God, the source of all things is answering my questions through coincidence. And then there was this big discussion went on between the Christians sitting around the table. Half of them said, yeah, that's how God works. He speaks to us through coincidence. And the other half said, he doesn't talk to anybody anymore, especially not to normal people looking at me, like, you know, very clearly not to guys like him. And I realized half these Christians didn't know that God was going to answer their questions and speak to them, and the other half did. So from that moment on, I started asking questions and receiving the answers back. And he wants to do the same with you. If you've got questions, he will answer them if you ask him seriously and wait for the answer.